Septiembre 14, 2006, 2:47, Las Venturas. The neon glow of the strip reflected off the wet asphalt, the night air heavy with the smell of exhaust and cigarette smoke. For most, it was just another Thursday night. For two men crouched behind the rusting sign of a defunct auto dealership, it was the culmination of years of planning. The casino that sat atop the parking lot belonged to Roberto Castillo, head of one of the most notorious cartels in the Southwest. Rumor had it the vault beneath the showroom contained no less than $4 million in cash, a fortune he had funneled from laundering operations and illegal poker games. The two men, John Mack McAllister, a former armored truck driver with a record of petty theft, and David Lang, a mechanic whose talents with engines and timing were unmatched, had watched the location for months. They knew the security rotations, the blind spots, even the way Castillo's night manager, a gaunt man named Vito, paced the floor after 2 a.m. They had devised an escape route that relied on the inventory of cars in the showroom. Two unassuming black sedans that would become their getaway vessels. Mac's hands trembled as he checked the timer on his phone, the digital red numbers reflecting in the rearview mirror of a parked Ford Explorer. "We have exactly 7 minutes to get in and out," he whispered, voice low but steady. David nodded, eyes scanning the dark lot. They slipped past the cameras with a combination of mirrors and timing, breaking the lock on the garage door with a tool that looked more like a crowbar than anything else. Inside, the scent of new leather and motor oil mixed with the faint perfume of Castillo's personal office. They moved with precision, pulling the heavy steel gate around the vault with rented key codes and stolen ID badges they had lifted from an unguarded secretary months prior. The lock clicked open. For $1 million in unmarked bills, stacked neatly in burlap bags, greeted them. The weight was immediate in their arms, their adrenaline spiking. Yet there was a rhythm to their panic, a choreography perfected in rehearsal. Outside, the engine of the first car roared, tires squealing as it swallowed the asphalt. The second sedan followed, lights off, shadows dancing beneath the fluorescent bulbs of the showroom. They disappeared into the night before any alarm could be fully raised, leaving only the faint hum of surveillance cameras and the smell of burnt rubber. By 3:12, Las Veneras PD received the first call, a shaky voice reporting gunshots. But the only crime visible on camera was the empty vault and two cars exiting at a speed that no ordinary patrol could intercept. Roberto Castillo was enraged but controlled. He called his lieutenants, then local law enforcement contacts, but the trace of the two men vanished as if they were ghosts. The city whispered. Local news ran snippets, but the cartel's influence stifled deeper investigation. The public knew only that $4 million had disappeared from one of the city's most secure locations. For Mac and David, the first days were a mixture of euphoria and paranoia. They split the cash into off-site lockers, rented safe houses under aliases, and bought burner phones. Neither slept more than 2 hours in a row. Every shadow felt like a cartel hitman or an undercover cop. Archive security footage showed two black sedans exiting at 2:52, one turning onto Westridge Avenue, the other vanishing through a service alley. Law enforcement compiled the footage into a file that would sit for years, reviewed only sporadically as leads dried up. Interviews with Castillo's staff revealed contradictions. Vito, the night manager, swore he saw two men, but they weren't wearing masks. "I only caught glimpses," while a cleaning crew reported the faint sound of voices, laughter, almost casual, unlike professional thieves. The initial investigation was extensive but flawed. The first lead came from a taxi driver who reported two men in dark clothing paying in cash to an unlisted motel on the outskirts of town, but tracing the money proved impossible. The story reached newspapers, yet the city's fascination was tempered by fear. Few spoke openly of the cartel. Mac and David maintained their cover by working separate low-profile jobs, David returning briefly to a local garage, Mac taking night shifts at a warehouse, both careful to avoid cameras, social media, and friends who might ask too many questions. But even in hiding, the city seemed to breathe around them. Years passed, and the theft became folklore. Local police referred to it in hushed tones as the vanishing vault heist, while the cartel quietly investigated, questioning staff and consultants, leaving a trail of suspicion but no arrests. It was in the seventh month, October 2006, that a seemingly innocuous clue appeared. A receipt for a custom license plate, traced to a now-abandoned apartment, showing a partial signature, DL. It was dismissed initially as circumstantial. Hundreds of plates went unclaimed every month. Mac laughed when David showed him the photo of the receipt. "We're ghosts, remember?" he said, yet unease lingered. By 2008, Mac had moved to a small town 30 miles east, working in a scrapyard, while David maintained a low profile at a trucking company. Their contact with each other dwindled. Paranoia made phone calls feel like confessions. Castillo had quietly replaced the stolen cash, but the humiliation of the breach lingered. The community reaction was equally varied. On the one hand, the theft seemed like a fairy tale, daring and almost cinematic. On the other, it underscored the reach of organized crime and the impotence of law enforcement against such figures. Transcript, recorded November 12, 2006, anonymous tip. They knew exactly where to hit. No one saw them coming. It was precise. Too precise. Detective Raul Herrera, who had been assigned the case from the beginning, noted the frustration in his journal. He was methodical, patient, and stubbornly convinced that the two men would eventually slip. His partner, a younger officer named Kyle Benton, was eager, tech-savvy, constantly pressing for new approaches, data mining, phone tracing, even early forms of facial recognition, but every lead led to dead ends. The first major narrative pivot came in 2009 when an informant in the cartel's inner circle claimed that the thieves were not locals, but had received insider help. Castillo's rage was documented in a series of letters seized in a separate investigation. They are ghosts. Every man we touch finds nothing. Archive. Letter 2009, page 3. The city never knew, but the police quietly compiled these fragments, hoping for a break. Then, in 2010, a petty thief in a neighboring county was caught trying to sell a similar set of bills. Upon examination, serial numbers matched the vault money. Yet the connection to Mac and David remained speculative. The bills had changed hands multiple times. For the duo, every year was a careful dance. They had assumed aliases, rented apartments under friends' names, and occasionally changed states. Their arrogance was tempered by constant vigilance, yet neither could entirely shake the thrill of the original heist. An unexpected twist emerged in 2012 when a janitor at an abandoned office building found a small black case, filled with photographs of the two sedans exiting the dealership, handwritten notes detailing timing and rotations, and a receipt from a lost vendor's car rental. It was turned over to police anonymously. Detective Benton finally had something concrete. The chain of evidence connected through handwriting analysis to the initial receipt marked DL, and the investigation was reignited. Meanwhile, Castillo's empire had grown, yet the memory of the theft haunted him. He ordered internal audits, threatened his own managers, and quietly placed bounties, but the years had allowed the thieves to blend into society. By 2015, the original case files were dusted off. Now, a 14-year-old cold file. New techniques in data mining, social media cross-referencing, and financial forensics offered possibilities the original detectives could not imagine. Benton, now lead detective, reviewed every photograph, note, and archive video frame. Each frame was a piece of a puzzle he was determined to solve. He noticed subtle details in the footage, a reflection in a car window, a shadow that suggested a pattern of escape. Then, a breakthrough. One of the two black sedans had never been traced to a vehicle identification number. It was purchased through a shell company under the name Lang Enterprises, registered briefly, then dropped. The name caught Benton's attention. Cross-referencing with earlier receipts and handwriting analysis revealed David Lang. Transcript. Audio, Detective Benton to Supervisor, March 14, 2015. It's him. All the evidence points to Lang. If we find him, we find McAllister. This revelation set off a chain reaction within law enforcement and the cartel's dormant network. Castillo's lieutenants realized that even after 14 years, the men had left footprints. They scrambled to protect their own operations, quietly eliminating connections that could lead back to the original theft. At the same time, investigators followed the financial trail. Dormant accounts, small cash deposits, and rental history all converged on a modest suburban neighborhood. Then, a small, almost trivial detail, a faded photograph tucked inside a discarded photo album, revealed Max standing outside a scrapyard, identifiable by unique tattoos visible only on the forearm. Benton, piecing this together, felt the adrenaline of the original hunt. After 14 years, the city was about to confront ghosts. Mac, unaware of the breakthrough, sipped coffee in his cluttered garage, the smell of oil thick in the air, the radio murmuring a story about a different robbery in a distant town. David, across town, wiped his hands on a rag after tuning a car engine, glancing at a wall clock. Both had thought the heist a closed chapter, a perfect crime, untouchable. Yet the city's memory, the persistence of a detective unwilling to let go, was about to remind them otherwise. And in the shadows, a small, yellowed receipt, the same that had been ignored 8 years prior, now became the key. One single, trivial piece of paper could unravel 14 years of carefully constructed anonymity. As the investigators closed in, the air in Las Venturas thickened with tension. Streets that had long been mundane now carried a sense of impending reckoning. The community, once enchanted by the audacity of the theft, now sensed the looming confrontation between long-hidden criminals and a meticulous law enforcement pursuing them. Who had truly been clever and who had been lucky was about to be revealed. The clock ticked toward discovery. And then, on a rainy morning in March 2020, a single photograph, mailed anonymously to Las Venturas PD, arrived in a plain envelope. It showed 2 black sedans parked in a remote garage, lights off, engines cold, with a note scrawled underneath in messy pen, "We are still here. You just didn't look hard enough." The city paused. For $1 million. 14 years. 2 men. 1 photograph. And a trail that had led nowhere, now pointing somewhere. The narrative was about to explode. The ghosts of the heist were no longer invisible. Archive. Photograph. March 2020. The detail was almost absurd in its simplicity. A shadow in the corner, a sticker on the windshield, a timestamp barely legible. But for Detective Benton, it was enough. The chase was no longer theoretical. It was real, and the city, still humming beneath the neon glow of Las Venturas, held its breath. If you want to know what was discovered next, subscribe and write in the comments which city you're watching from. March 16th, 2020, 7:14, Las Venturas Police Department. Detective Kyle Benton stood over the photograph that had arrived 2 days prior, the edges curling slightly from the damp envelope. The image was grainy, the lighting poor, yet unmistakable. The 2 black sedans parked in a nondescript garage, engines off, the faint reflection of a man in a raincoat visible through the windshield. The note beneath it, "We're still here. You just didn't look hard enough," burned in his mind. Benton ran a gloved hand over the glossy surface, feeling the ridges of the printed ink, imagining the hands that had held it before sending it. 14 years had passed since the heist, and suddenly, the cold file from 2006 was alive again. He called in his partner, Detective Sarah Monroe, a younger officer who had a reputation for tenacity and innovative thinking. "Look at this," Benton said, pointing at the photograph. "Everything we've been chasing all these years. Mac, Lang, it's right here. They're not ghosts. They've just been waiting for us to notice." Monroe leaned in, scanning the image with a magnifying glass. The garage had no address, but she noted a small sticker on the corner of the glass, a registration tag for a regional auto inspection, partially legible. It was enough. Within hours, the detectives cross-referenced vehicle registrations, shell companies, and old receipts from the 2006 investigation. The pieces began to align. The partial license plate linked to David Lang, the old rental agreements and the abandoned apartment, and the handwriting on the initial receipt confirmed as his. Benton could feel the rush of adrenaline that he imagined Mac and David had felt during the original heist. This was his own adrenaline, years late, but just as consuming. The detectives decided on a two-pronged approach: surveillance of potential addresses and digital forensics, tracing financial transactions tied to the garage. They discovered subtle movements: withdrawals from credit unions in small towns, transfers under aliases, and inconspicuous purchases of car parts. Every tiny breadcrumb led them closer. Transcript: audio, Benton to Monroe, March 17th, 2020. They've been meticulous. No social media, no credit cards. But even ghosts leave fingerprints. Meanwhile, the city was slowly becoming aware of the renewed investigation. Local news picked up the story. $4 million heist. Police close in after 14 years, with grainy archive images of the black sedans. Public fascination surged. Tips came in from citizens recalling strange men, cars parked for hours, or unusual activity near old garages. One call, from an elderly mechanic on Westridge Avenue, seemed particularly promising. "I remember a man who brought in two identical engines, paid cash, and disappeared the same night," the caller said. Benton and Monroe followed the lead, discovering that Mac had, in fact, traded parts of the stolen cars over the years, thinking anonymity would shield him. The investigation gained momentum. On March 21st, 2020, surveillance cameras installed near a suburban warehouse caught David Lang, cautious and methodical, moving a small safe into a storage unit. The detectives watched silently, noting the precision of his movements, the way he checked shadows, how he paused to listen for distant engines. The tension was palpable. Archive, security footage, timestamp March 21st, 2020, 1942, showed Lang lifting the safe, glancing over his shoulder, and slipping into a waiting van. Benton and Monroe coordinated with tactical units. They were prepared for resistance, but hoped for surprise, relying on careful timing. The community, once charmed by the audacity of the heist, now watched as reality closed in on the figures who had eluded justice for over a decade. On March 24th, a breakthrough came unexpectedly. A discarded ledger in a dumpster near one of Lang's known hideouts revealed a series of codes, bank account numbers, and cryptic notes about storage units and car models. The meticulous record-keeping, which Lang had believed secure in his mind, became his undoing. Benton felt a mixture of professional triumph and eerie reflection. He could almost feel the ghosts of 2006 hovering behind him. The adrenaline, the laughter, the precision. He imagined Mac and Lang calculating escape routes, the smell of new leather, the vibration of engines, and the weight of $4 million in burlap bags. The first arrest was David Lang on March 26th. The SWAT team moved quietly, apprehending him without incident. Lang's expression was unreadable, calm, almost bemused, as if he had anticipated this moment. In the interrogation room, he remained mostly silent, answering questions with brevity, but providing subtle hints of pride and regret intertwined. Transcript: interrogation, March 26th, 2020, Benton, 14 years. How did you stay hidden? Lang, paciencia, and knowing when to be invisible. Benton and Mac. Lang's eyes flickered briefly. Then he leaned back. He's careful. You'll find him when you're ready. Meanwhile, Mac's location was traced to a scrapyard east of Las Veneras. Surveillance revealed him maintaining machinery, wiping oil from his hands, and glancing at the horizon as though aware of someone watching. The detectives coordinated a dawn raid on March 28th. As the sun rose, casting long shadows across rusted cars and piles of scrap metal, Mac was apprehended without resistance. In the interrogation room, he showed a different demeanor from Lang. Mac was tense, fidgeting, shifting his weight, the years of running etched into his posture. Transcript: interrogation, March 28th, 2020, Monroe. You've evaded capture for 14 years. Why stop now? Mac, you found me. What else is there to say? Both men were processed, their possessions cataloged, including the small black case found years earlier and the ledger with coded bank accounts. Investigators discovered that parts of the $4 million had been laundered through local businesses, hidden in safe deposit boxes, and slowly spent over the years. The precision and patience of the thieves were almost admirable, yet the moral weight of their actions was undeniable. The city had been unknowingly touched by their audacity, their anonymity, and the quiet fear they imposed on associates and the cartel. Roberto Castillo, upon hearing of the arrests, reportedly laughed bitterly, then began auditing his own operations with renewed vigilance. The power dynamics within the cartel shifted subtly. Respect for the ghosts of the heist lingered, even as the men were brought to justice. Benton and Monroe reflected on the case's human cost. The years of fear, the community tension, the subtle psychological scars on those who had witnessed fragments of the heist or been indirectly affected. Victims' families, particularly the night manager Vito, experienced relief tempered by the passage of time. The $4 million, though partially recovered, had largely disappeared into a labyrinth of transactions, leaving a moral ambiguity. The criminals had been caught, yet the money was never fully returned. A final twist emerged during asset recovery. In a safe deposit box, Benton found a photograph of Mack and Lang laughing beside the vault the morning after the heist, a silent testament to their audacity. Beneath it was a note. Some things are worth more than money. It was almost philosophical, a window into their mindset, their pride, their acknowledgement of risk, and perhaps a taunt to anyone who had pursued them for 14 years. The psychological profile of the criminals, compiled by Monroe, highlighted their combination of intelligence, risk tolerance, and understanding of human behavior. They had avoided detection not through brute force, but through careful observation, patience, and small, calculated errors that never amounted to exposure. The investigation concluded officially in July 2020. Mack and Lang were charged with grand theft, conspiracy, and multiple counts of fraud. The trial drew significant attention, both locally and nationally. While the legal system provided a definitive judgment, the story's moral resonance lingered in the community. Lessons about diligence, persistence, and the thin line between brilliance and criminality became subjects of local discussion. Families affected by the heist found closure in the arrests, but many reflected on how 14 years of uncertainty had shaped their lives. The Las Vegas Police Department, bolstered by technological advances, had finally closed a case once deemed unsolvable. Detective Benton, reviewing the evidence and the recovered items one final time, felt the weight of the city's memory, the patience of law enforcement, and the relentless passage of time. From $1 million, 14 years, 2 men, the ghosts were finally tangible. As Mack and Lang were escorted from the courthouse, Benton considered the city itself, the neon lights, the wet asphalt, the smell of exhaust and cigarette smoke. Unchanged, yet forever altered by the invisible imprint of 2 ordinary men who had dared to defy the improbable. The public marveled at the audacity and precision of the heist. Yet few could reconcile the years lost to fear and speculation. In interviews, both Mack and Lang remained stoic, acknowledging their crimes but offering little explanation beyond the thrill of the plan and the meticulous execution. Detective Monroe summarized the case during a press briefing. The vanishing vault heist was more than a theft. It was a study in human behavior, patience, and the interplay between crime and society. 14 years of investigation remind us that persistence, observation, and detail can overcome even the most calculated risks. The epilogue of the case revealed subtle shifts in the community, stricter security measures in commercial enterprises, heightened awareness among residents, and an appreciation for the meticulous work of law enforcement. Families once haunted by uncertainty were able to reconcile with the past. Mack and Lang, now facing the consequences of their actions, became symbols of both audacity and the inevitability of accountability. The story of the $4 million heist remains part of Las Vegas folklore, a cautionary tale, a marvel of criminal precision, and a testament to the persistence of justice. In the quiet moments, Vincent imagined the early hours of September 14th, 2006, the smell of leather, the roar of engines, the weight of money in the arms of two ordinary men who had dared to become legends for a night. The city moved on, yet the narrative lingered, archived in photographs, receipts, testimonies, and the collective memory of those who had witnessed or chased the shadows. 14 years had passed, and the ghosts had finally been found, proving that even the most elusive acts leave traces, and that time, observation, and diligence eventually converge to reveal truth. What do you think? Was justice fully served after all these years? Leave your thoughts in the comments.